Great, so I would like to take some questions from the floor. What I'd like is to take 2 or 3 questions and we'll try to group them. And so if I could ask maybe the first question here, and then people who have similar questions can add to it. Yes, please.
Martin Lucas Smith. So my question is about affordability. The Conservative government has failed to tackle the historic north-south divide, leaving post-industrial areas in continued decline. This means ever more pressure in people moving to this region rather than to other post-industrial areas of the country. And so housing costs are very excessive and water stress is great. Given the problems of a city where increasingly only the rich can afford to live here unacceptably, to what extent should be there compromise or not on building on the Greenbelt? And what other policies, e.g. investment in the north, mass council house building, etc., would you push for to really solve the problem of affordability at source?
Great, thank you. So other questions that kind of speak to this, that issues about housing affordability, but also what broader questions in terms of regional balancing of the economy and growth that we might do. Yes, in the green there.
Okay, thank you. So my question, approximately 1,400,000 Danes live in non-market cooperative housing. An opportunity to own your own home at affordable, capped, non-market prices, meeting the needs of people like me, not greed. Why are we wedded to developer-led or market-led housing when it hasn't and won't fix our housing crisis, as we've heard this evening? Why don't we have non-market solutions here in Cambridge?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to ask a question because I think that the Crown owns a lot of land. Why is no one asking this? How much land does the Crown own? And if you want to talk about how are people going to afford it? If the Crown, this as Galloway said, put away childish things like princes and kings and queens and all this kind of thing. So surely it would be more affordable if we had a more even spread of housing and land. Also worth keeping in mind, by the way, talking about growth, because every recession since the 60s, growth has been getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So I think there is limits to growth, obviously. Now the New York Bank of Mellon has 29 trillion in uninvested capital money. It's just sitting there. So what does that tell you about the economy right now, the world economy now? Not great, is it? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you both very much for all your questions. A lot to unpack. I'd say maybe we can take it in turns. We'll get back to the end. I'd say there are 3 things I would sort of pick out from it. First of all, about building on the green belts. And just to be clear, the Lib Dem manifesto proposes not building on the green belts, and that actually we have enough space on brownfield sites as it is. So to be clear on that answer to start with. I think a big part of the north-south divide is something that comes from the Midlands, which is possibly the worst of all possible options, is it's actually about connectivity. So one of the reasons so much growth and industry is centred around Cambridge is because of our connections to London, which is the capital city. It's always going to be quite important, but of course the university as well, and we have the connectivity here that people can move very easily. We can travel to Europe incredibly easily as well. One of the big challenges for the northern towns is of course making those connections. So I think a large part of solving the north-south divide is around making public transport more easy, but also making hybrid and remote working more possible as well, and different organisations being more flexible in how that works, so that people don't have to necessarily work in the town that they live in. I do really agree with the points around public sector housing, and there are many other models of what we could explore rather than just market-led. Something which the Lib Dems have looked at within Cambridge, which is not the perfect answer, we decided, but I think it's worth floating, but it's around the idea of key worker housing. This is something that's been trialled quite successfully in Lambeth, where they've identified a group of public sector workers where they have a real lack in the area who they want to support, and they provide housing at a third of market rent that's largely costed by the council to support that, because they recognise the value of those workers. Now, I don't think that's a perfect solution, because the challenge that many would give is, well, what about the people who you don't choose? What about everybody else? What about the affordable housing? But there are many more flexible options, and I think there should be an element here, so I talk about Cambridge having its own independence, to actually look at what are the issues that we face, where are the gaps we need to fill, who do we need to support. So I think flexibility is definitely possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you. So I'll address the north-south divide, and you can probably tell my accent isn't particularly southern. I'm from the northwest, and I've got to say I do resent the comment about the north continually in decline. As someone who spent most of their life there, the north isn't in decline. Yes, it's not London, yes, it's not Cambridge, but it's perfectly great on its own, and it's doing pretty well, thanks. But of course, in all seriousness, we can do more, we should do more. One of the most inspiring pledges in the 2019 manifesto by the Conservatives was the mission to level up the country. And look, again, as someone from a former mining town in the northwest of England, we've seen the benefits of levelling up. Of course, there is so much more to go. And obviously we're distracted with the COVID and the war and all the rest of it, we're all in it for. We need to go further. And it involves investing in local communities, building the infrastructure they need. Cheney mentioned transport, that is a massive issue in the north, getting from east to west rather than just how can we get to London that little bit quicker. And that's why, ironically, I support getting rid of HS2 and focusing the resources on local transport. But ultimately, again, it's about supporting those people through growth, what we were talking about before. If those economies can grow, by whether it's liberalising planning laws, whether it's encouraging investment, or whether it's by cutting people's taxes so they have more money to spend and they generate their own local economy. That's the way we do it organically. I'm not a fan of central government imposing the ways in which the North should better themselves. It's giving them the opportunities, giving them the infrastructure, empowering them to do it themselves. We don't all have to be mini Londons either. There's different ways of contributing to the UK economy. And I think too often it might upset people in the room, a southern viewpoint to say that the north is suffering the poor north. The north's doing pretty well, of course it can do better, but with investment, with infrastructure, and with growth, it will do and can do.
Good questions, everybody. Martin, you were talking about affordability and the historic north-south divide. So I was really upset when Sunak cancelled phase 2 of HS2. I was looking forward to that. When I go home to see my family in Clitheroe, it takes 5 trains to get there, and that just seems counterproductive. And I'm really trying not to drive. So, housing costs, obviously then you've got this weird thing in Cambridge. People, my family visited me here in Cambridge and they see the housing prices, they see the price of a beer even, and it's ridiculous. So there's lots of people who come here and then they go away again for a better standard of living up north. But there's lots of people from the north that come down here for jobs as well, for technical jobs and science jobs. So we've got this very weird conundrum, but then we've got public sector workers that can't afford to live here either. So we've got the average house, to get onto the housing ladder you need a combined salary of 85 grand, and the average pay for a nurse, a teacher or a social worker is about £30,000. So you do the math there, they can't get on the housing ladder. And how are we going to run the schools and the hospitals? You know, I mean, at my son's school, at Morley School, I spoke to the head teacher, and she can't get the staff, never mind teaching assistants and the poor pay that they're on. How are they going to live in Cambridge? You know, a lot of them don't, they have to travel in. Or what public transport? So there's so many issues here in the south that people think is so good, but it's not. It's really, really painful. Your question over here about 1 million days, the cooperative housing solutions, the affordable non-market prices. Thinking outside the box, brilliant. This is what we need now. And these are solutions that are being arrived at without going down the growth route, without thinking about that, and about becoming collaborative and thinking how we're going to create a better way of life. Also, we could talk about cooperative food growing as well, which is very, very important for our futures. We all need to get growing vegetables and so on. The right to roam, just quickly about the right, the Crown, I just wanted to say just as question about the Crown. I mean, it's an absolute scandal in this country that most of the land is owned by the royalty, it's owned by the landowning class. Still, here in England, in Scotland, we've got the right, or the church. 92%. Round. Anyway, go.
I'm sure we'll get back to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have 2 things. Let me go back to my childhood when I had a neighbor
And I do remember this neighbor till now. I'm his friend, you see, and I know his, we are growing together, and the other neighbor as well. We know each other. But here in Cambridge, unfortunately, my kids keep losing their neighbors because of what? It's very expensive city. So I'm here to gamble on what we call it. I call it support the original people here. You know what's happening here? Let's talk about this. We don't have sustainable citizens anymore. We have to support our local community, support them with deposit. We have to reduce the deposit for them. They managed to build 500 new houses that they managed to market, sell it over China or Hong Kong. This is dangerous. We're changing the demography of our citizens, of our city. This is number one. So we need to gamble on our own citizens, support them. Now, we keep losing neighbors. They are going outside the city because of cost living. They are going outside because of the housing prices up. So there's what I call it, I used to call it like, it might be with this demographic war, what they faced in Gaza or in the Bethlehem, removing the original people and bringing other people. This is dangerous for the local community. We have to support the original people here, support them with cost of living. This is the reason why we at the Worker Party, next to my heart, you know why? We are asking the 60 billion from the NATO to come support our people because they are starving. They don't have money to pay the bills. They don't have money to face this cost of living. So we have to divert this money to support our own army, our own security, our own citizens, the students suffering, the teachers suffering. They are going abroad. 30% of our doctors going abroad. They are considering to go abroad. Already thousands every year. They are going abroad. Teachers, nursing team as well, and professionals. Why? We need to support our people, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think basically what Shani said about key worker flats is quite a good solution to the problem of affordability, at least for a large class of people. It's a good beginning. Essentially what you're doing when you do that is you have people who are providing vital services, and you provide them with a standard of living, a quality of life that is, I would say, almost on a par with the other people who are like, got more money and have their own private house, etc. Include also other perks. In addition to that, make sure that that we produce an even field for people, so that people feel that even though they're not in a high-paying job, they actually can exist in a respectable and comparable way to other people. That's what I would say about the housing, for example. You want to say something?
It's not a question, it's a remark. It's all right if it's all right for everybody.
Yeah.
You have to begin somewhere, and so I'm answering about the key workers.
Who is not a key worker?
It's just a remark. It's all right if it's all right
Well,
for everybody.
there's people who are not key workers. There's people who are, for example, homeless and who don't have a job. There's unemployed. There's all sorts of people. And other people who are not key workers are people who have a lot of money and can afford. We define, I suppose, key workers as people who can't afford to go on the private market and get a house. There's a lot of difference. You have to also bear in mind there's a lot of difference in the prices of houses and properties and the rents between the centre of Cambridge, which is what people take as being Cambridge, and the outskirts. Obviously, there's some places you prefer not to live in. Those places are cheaper. I mean, it's not a straightforward question to answer, but ideas such as key worker flats, community, cooperative housing are good. It's a good start.
Thank you.
Thank you. Martin, you probably heard me say this before, but the regional inequality, I think, is one of the most fundamental problems this country is faced on. It's the London-centred economy. And I think that the destruction of the regional structures in 2010 was a terrible error. Very rare you get a clap for that. But, and as a consequence, I've chaired a cross-party group in Parliament ever since for the East of England, because I think there is something that between Westminster and local government, and I think it can make a difference. And what's extraordinary is that I think we've learned recently that the structural funds that used to come from the European Union, the government has now said that they're going to scrap that and spend it on the National Service Plan instead. Now, I think it's descent into the absurd, frankly. I really hope that doesn't happen. But it's really hard to address regional inequalities I think you have to just keep working on it. And in fact, probably Mia knows more than most people on how you address that kind of thing. On affordability, Pamela, I thought was a really strong point. And I'm pleased to see the Labour manifesto has a strong commitment to supporting co-ops. And that will be one of the ways in which we can do it. Labour introduced key worker housing in the last Parliament. In fact, there was some in East Chesterton. I remember essentially it's the key public service workers, teachers, people working in the NHS and so on. So I think it's an important way forward. Community land trusts. I mean, partly this is about the price of land, which makes these things so difficult to do. But it can be done, and I would strongly support it. I'd also say, and we should be proud of this, that in our city, the City Council here has I think, the second highest number of council houses in the last year or two have been built. So it shows that it can actually be done. That corresponds. And then finally, just on the affordability thing, inflation has been a terrible...
That's a trick statistic as well.
Inflation has been a terrible curse in this country in the last few years, and one of the unintended things which people don't spot entirely is it's inflated rents, which means landlords play the system, and which is why we've so got to end no-fault evictions and scrap Section 21, which the government's failed to do.
Thank you. Right. So, before we go to other questions, did everyone who asked a question, did you feel like it was answered there? Did kind of we get to the heart of it? Yes.
Not entirely. I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said, Daniel, but I'm sensing a lack of commitment to actually investing in those post-industrial areas. And for the record, my family actually comes from the north. I'm not in any way dissing it, but that you yourself, the Conservative candidate, were saying that there's much more to do there. And that's what I'm saying. The fact that you have, trains Clitheroe that we're still running on diesel engines, that's what I'm saying, is that if we can get the north, those post-industrial areas much more invested in, more people want to live there, and it will even out the country. So that's what I'm saying. I was not insulting industrial community.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Helen Farney. I've been a resident in Cambridge for about 50 years, and I've had children here and used the services, local services. And I just wanted to say, yes, of course, growth has been very important, because when we started living here, Cambridge was very small, and we had to go outside Cambridge to get facilities for children, and sort of there was some room for growth. That was great that it's grown, but I think it's grown a bit too much now. I don't know. It feels that there's a lot of housing and not much services have not improved. My question is specific to Daniel Zagner, only because he's been the one that has been in power. I mean, the other people in the panel, they can have visual thinking and they would like to take that position of becoming our next MP. That would be great. But my question is to yourself, because you've been in power, you've been an RMP, and during past 10 years, definitely, I have seen Cambridge, in my view anyway, there's a growing amount of potholes, social services is going downhill, I don't know, council services, even planning, all sorts of things, whatever I have been doing during the past 50 years, it seems things have got harder, worse, anything to do with children's services, anything to do with elderly services. And just taking things to do with traffic. I mean, you say the traffic's got really worse, but I think it's because somebody's selling these traffic lights to big companies or something, because they're growing everywhere. You're blocking a lot of side roads, which is fine for the sort of people living, in the side roads, but you're even trying to block up Mill Road Bridge. If I have to go from one side of the bridge to the other, I'm just saying that everything seems to be getting worse and more cluttered. Is
there a question in there?
My question to you is, because there's so much that seems to have got worse, my question to you is, what have you done in the past 9 years that now you want to do from now to another 5 years? Because I haven't seen anything improving in my past 50 years. Do you? That's just my question.
Are there other questions about public services and things that we might grouped together. Did you have one?
Can I just say, sorry, no. Please also not blame the government, because normally people blame Conservatives, the local and national. Please, what about that you've done locally?
And I won't just pick on Daniel, but speaking of, I'm going to be honest, I'm a county councillor. What would the candidates do to help local government have their money in such a way that they can invest, rather than the short-term money that we get at the moment, which means we can't do the pothole maintenance cycles or whatever, or
Keep
employ
more
people.
of the business rates as well.
Well, if you want to add in about business rates, that's fine too, because they are very related. But what plans do your parties have to make a better relationship in terms of investing in local services? Thank you.
Great. A similar question, something we can put in there? Yes.
Can I just do a very quick one?
Yeah.
An observation. Cambridge seems to have vanity projects, these cyclops. Sorry. Cambridge is full of vanity projects. The Cyclops roundabout, Histon Road, the other one down at Addenbrooks, which cost millions and millions and millions. We've got Milton Road, GCP, a lot of this is related to. But actually, all we really need, I mean, if you cycle up Cherry Hinton Road, it's appalling. What was once very nice, with a nice cycle lane all printed out in red, it's almost disintegrated. They're spending millions on vanity projects when all we need is paint, lines, and everybody will be safe.
I've got to film myself on this one.
I'll see if I can.
That's a vanity project, I say.
It is. I mean, very interesting set of observations, one of which I think actually reflects how little understanding collectively all of us in this room actually have about how the state functions, and in particular what MPs can and cannot do. Daniel Zeichner cannot do a thing as an MP for Cambridge on potholes. So my question to all of you is, in terms of the future of Cambridge and improving our public services and governance systems, how are you going to ensure that we are all educated so that we can give you all informed comments, informed questions, rather than having somebody like me moaning and saying, do you all know the basic concepts of parliamentary sovereignty and the rule of law, and what councils legally can do and cannot do? Because, for example, the Greater Cambridge Partnership doesn't allow money to be spent on maintaining roads. You have to. So public services, austerity, local government, investment, and how do we educate people about the structure of government and what local government versus central government can do?
What a fantastic set of questions. And let me start by addressing your point. I would love to have been in power for the last 9 or 10 years, but we're in opposition in government, and it's incredibly frustrating, and that is the difference. That's what I very much hope to be able to do the things that we talk about over the next period. That will only happen if we get a change in government. So it goes to the heart of Antony's point, really. Quite often you'll see MPs claiming they've done this, that or the other. And I'm absolutely appalled, frankly, because by and large it is never going to be down to one person who's done things. It goes back to my comments at the beginning. You work with colleagues, particularly in local government, to try and achieve things. So there are things that people want to do in Cambridge. It'll be part of my job to talk to people who've got the power in government to do it. Now, in opposition, it's much harder. It doesn't stop you trying. Let me give you an example. Some people remember the appalling destruction of Wilton Terrace some years ago. I actually ended up talking to Greg Clark, who was then the local government Secretary of State, and saying, because he knew Cambridge, and saying, please, can we not have something left of Cambridge? And he actually said, above my pay grade. And, unbelievable. But he said he would have been chastised by his officials because he couldn't intervene in that kind of way. So it's not quite as straightforward as some of that seems. The point about, I think vanity projects. Look, I want to see better infrastructure in Cambridge. I think we're the top cycling city in the country. That's despite infrastructure locally. So I'm very pleased to see infrastructure being improved. As I hinted earlier, I absolutely sympathise with how difficult it is to live with those changes. But frankly, the only way we're going to solve the pothole problem is not by short-term fixes, but actually doing the long-term road maintenance that should have been done years ago. That will be disrupted, unfortunately. I actually think the roundabouts are a good idea. I'm in favour of the kind of things, if you go to Walthamstow and see the Little Holland schemes, they were done properly, not short-term cheap fixes like was done here, I'm afraid, in some cases, but done properly. You can get low-traffic neighbourhoods to work and really be transformational. Long-term funding is in Labour's manifesto for local government, which will come as a huge relief, I think, to people in local government.
Okay, I'll keep to the time this time, sorry, Susan. Okay, I think both the questions that you were saying before and the one about potholes, so it's all about investment, finding the money to make these things work. And the Green Party believe that we can't have Scandinavian services without Scandinavian taxes. So the super rich are going to have to pay more, and that it's quite simple really. That is how we get the funding. So we think we should be asking the multimillionaires, the billionaires, who are the ones that have the broadest shoulders, who can give the money, just 1%. We're not talking about robbing them. It's 1%, and that would go to fund the things that we need, sorting out the roads, sorting out NHS, funding how to paying key workers a fair wage. And make the conducting retrofitting programs and all the things that we need to fix this country, all the things that we are in crisis with at the moment. Concerning vanity projects, I use Cherry Hinton Road every day. I've got my son on the back of the bike, taking him to school. I don't feel safe. I go on the pavement. I go to the pavement. It's ridiculous. It's just a bit of paint. Get it on the road so we can see there's a clear cycle lane and make it consistent. There was a consultation back in 2019 that talked about intuitive bus stops, that talked about cycle lanes, and it was all going to be very nice. That was back in 2019, that was 5 years ago. We're still waiting. Excellent question about collective understanding. How do we educate ourselves more at the moment? We're in a country where we're really disempowered generally as a population because we don't have this sort of education in our schools. I got to choose politics at A level. If I could have chosen it at GCSE, I would have. I think it's terrible that kids leave school without the knowledge of what is the House of Lords and how does it work and how are we surprised that voting turnout is so low? Caroline Leakers was the first one to instigate natural history GCSE, and I think a citizenship GCSE is very much needed. We had something similar in the 1950s. We need to bring it back. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Do you mind if I stand? I'm tired of sitting. And then it was very long. Now, we have two issues here. One, if you are talking about the city, I think Daniel, he didn't fight enough for better budget for the city. Really, the city getting bigger. We need stronger budget to fix the roads, the cycling community suffering. There's no lines, everyone's struggling, the main road here and there, the social care down. So what we need fresh blood, fresh face to fight for bigger budget from the central government. It's not just we give them, send them the money, and we get nothing here. So our people need a stronger budget. Our city needs bigger budget. This is number one. Number two, any manifesto talking about increasing the tax on the people, this is really dangerous, because what will happen if you increase the tax for the rich people or poor people? The rich people will go to Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, and I saw them, I know them. They are going abroad, they will run abroad easily. Better life, no tax, easy money. Even Bishop Sunak, he get green card to run abroad, okay, and his money abroad, okay? And some people, they got their bank account in Israel as well, to run away. Now, what we need here, we need really to bring back the money from the NATO. Again, 60 billion, and we are talking about inflation and the problem we are facing, problem with inflation, but 60 billion, we are struggling. There's 4.3 million children in poverty, suffering. There's big food bank, people, the queue getting longer and longer. Let's bring the money and feed our people, support our community. Any extra tax, more homeless people, more struggle, more poor family, more people running abroad. Enough. Let's stand together and stop this. Thank you very much.
I don't know where to start. To talk about the vanity projects, as David pointed out, it's true that there is a lot of emphasis, usually in local government and central government, on building things that you will be remembered by, nice big things, and leaving the simple things, the boring things, which nobody will remember you by, to decay. So for example, HS2 caused a lot of trouble with the rest of the railway. You've noticed, I suppose, that there's a lot of trouble with strikes, and there's not enough money to carry out night work, so everything has to be interrupted during weekends. This is particularly strong in London, not here perhaps. So this is a trend. But I've got to admit to you, I've forgotten the other questions, because you bunch them together.
Also about public services, about investing, allowing schemes to allow local scale government to invest, and also about educating the public about civics and the structure of government.
Okay, so I think one of the biggest things we can possibly do in our country is educate children and give opportunities to young people to improve their position, their certainties in life. And educating people about how Parliament works is a detail. It can be taught to somebody in a few minutes. What I am focusing on it was clear that the question aimed at Daniel was wrong. He's not in power in Cambridge. Yeah, and he's in opposition. Yeah, do you know what I mean? If you vote him in, you give him power.
Yeah.
But he's not got any power right now.
Power at 9 years. I'm saying.
But he doesn't have power. He's just an MP. He's consulting you. I know. I'm against voting him, and I'd like you to vote for me. You have to be fair, and he doesn't have a say.
It's a bit more nuanced.
More or less. So what I believe in is we've got to give our youth more opportunities to turn into responsible adults. That's what I think the foundation should be, and everything else will come from this, because the youth of today are the generation of tomorrow, the adults of tomorrow, and we are failing them at the moment.
Thank you.
Together, and I think for me the answer to all of those questions is we need a unitary authority.
Yes.
The way Cambridge's government works, its local government, is ridiculous. So I'm a city councillor, which I think puts me at the bottom of the pecking order. But then we also have a county council, which is slightly more important. We have a Greater Cambridge Partnership, and we don't quite know what they do. We then also have a combined authority, and no one's got a clue about that. And then on top of all of that, there is a mayor, and then this silly role called the Police and Crime Commissioner. And when you lump all of those things together, and as a city council at the bottom of this, you get the brunt of it. When a resident says to you, there's a massive pothole here, can you sort it out? And you have to say no, because it's one of only 4 people, depending on where exactly your pothole is and which verge it's on. And it's ridiculous, it's bureaucratic, it's ridiculously confusing, which I think ties into the education point around how are people expected to know. It's also incredibly expensive, because there is so much duplication there within the roles. That also means these big projects take so long, because there are so many different organisations there who don't necessarily sync together very well. I think a city of the size that Cambridge is now should be ripe for a unitary authority, which would mean we have one layer of government across the piece. And that would start to give you the economy of scale that I think links slightly to your question, Jennifer. make around it as well in terms of local government finances. Part of it does come from the government, but one of the biggest drains on the county council at the moment is within social care, and it's a drain across our whole society. I'm incredibly proud of the Liberal Democrats' proposals to properly reform social care, and so to actually really elevate the role of carers, to pay a proper carers allowance, and to make sure we return the value of social care to the community, so that many of those issues which then become big problems down the line when people enter hospital and need support in their homes can be addressed much earlier. So I think there's a big role to play there in terms of the social care also.
Thank you.
So the first question rightly highlighted that local council services have been declining, and that question was asked of the Labour MP, and it was rightly pointed out that the Labour MP can't do anything about these issues, but the Labour-run council can do. For the last 30 years, the council has been run by the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats, and they've failed. I've spoken to hundreds of people across the city who tell me that they don't think their voices are being listened to. They think their views and their priorities don't get taken into account in decision making, and frankly many of them think their votes are being taken for granted. And I think sadly they are right in lots of ways. You know, David mentioned vanity projects. It's so obvious, like they're not people's priorities. They're ideologically driven pet projects which ultimately only hurt hard-working people who don't care about a Cyclops roundabout. They just want to get to work. And you can cycle without needing a Cyclops roundabout, frankly.
You didn't get knocked off on it.
But there's a question about how we can get more money to local government, and I agree. I mean, there's two things to that. One example, I mentioned HS2 being scrapped before and putting money into local services. That's an easy one. But we talked about it a few times, growth. It's not always popular, but that's how you pay for more local services. And then the fourth question about education, fantastic. I've been advocating that since I got into politics. The level of education for young people is poor, frankly, when it comes to politics. And it's already been touched on. I can't believe I'm now agreeing with the Lib Dem candidate that we basically need to simplify local government. It's far too complicated. I think most of us here, it's probably fair to say, are a little bit obsessed by politics. We all love it, we're all big geeks, and I still struggle to understand how the mechanisms of government work in Cambridge. And we're struggling. How can people who are new to politics get their head around it? So absolutely, let's bring it in.
Problem is, Shane, it was your party in government that created the GCP and the combined authorities.
Okay, so I'm going to go absolutely agree. I am the Conservative Party candidate, but I'm not going to stand here and say every single thing we've done in 14 years is perfect. That was a mistake. Surely we want politicians who are open and honest and transparent rather than just spouting a party line, right? I agree. Obviously the idea of it was to give more power to local people to decide how their own areas are run rather than be done centrally, but I think particularly in Cambridge that's gone far too far, and the GCP frankly is a nonsense.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I think we'll take another round of questions. As someone who works on austerity, I'm quite actually interested that no one mentioned kind of 14 years of local government austerity, because local government has really taken the brunt of that. Anyhow.
And if growth was successful, why have services got worse?
Yeah. Did everyone who asked questions there feel that they were responded to?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Good.